Hello and welcome to Sports Flashes. I am Rahul Pandey and you're listening to the Classroom Football Podcast. If you remember, in our last episode, we made our La Liga debut, talking about the young players who have risen to new heights this season in the Spanish First Division football. So this week, we decided why not stay in Spain for a little bit more time and talk about a club that has been dealing with a lot of lately, Football Club Barcelona. And to talk about it, I was joined by Omar Hawwash, who is the CEO and chief editor of Blaugranagram, which is a news media portal dedicated for everything Football Club Barcelona. And pretty recently, which is only this month, they announced their collaboration with the club. So it is out and out an authentic source for all the information that you need about the Spanish giants. Omar and his team have been pretty busy with so much to cover about FC Barcelona. So I decided why not have a crash course on the events that have been going around at the Camp Nou. And we started with Neymar Jr.'s departure in summer 2017. Covered the Ernesto Valverde time and reached onto the current set of problems, which even include Lionel Messi, or at least the talks of Lionel Messi leaving FC Barcelona. So it is going to be a long ride. It is going to be a bumpy ride, but it is surely going to be an exciting classroom football ride. But before we start off, just a quick announcement. A Classroom Football Podcast is now available on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Audio Boom, JioSaavn, and most of the places you get your pod from. You can listen to all our episodes on these audio platforms once they have been premiered on our Sports Flashes app and website. That being said, here comes the conversation. Hi Omar, how are you? You must be pretty busy since the restart because the frequency of La Liga games has just been crazy and tough to follow. And apart from that, there's been an awful lot of drama to cover at FC Barcelona.
Yeah, hi Raul. Thank you for having me. I think it's nice to finally be able to connect with you and finally be on this podcast. There's been a lot of games going on. We've seen a lot of different type of football, and because there have been so many games, I've also been watching some other games from other teams. I think the Villarreal Sociedad game was interesting. So it's definitely allowed me, at least, to be able to watch football a bit differently because you see things that you don't normally see because of how often these games are being played. The intensity that's being played can, in some ways, be lessened by the amount of games that, like, the amount of games that they're playing. Instead of playing, let's say, once a week in the league, they're playing 2 games a week, and so the intensity in those 2 games might not be as high as it would be if it was just a single game. So that's also definitely affecting the players. The rules that have been put in place are also affecting it, but I think it's been very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely been. So Omar, I'm actually thinking as to where to begin our episode today, because there's just been so much to talk about FC Barcelona. But I believe let's start with Neymar Jr.'s departure in summer transfer window of 2017. How did things escalate from there on for Football Club Barcelona, and how was the reception for the new manager Ernesto Valverde early on?
Neymar leaving was obviously a big blow. Back then, the remontada had just happened. It was pretty recent, and he played a big part in that. He was, in many people's eyes, was the best player on the pitch. So the talking point for many when he was rumored to leave and join Paris was that he wanted to be the star because he felt overshadowed by, say, Messi after the game and in the games that followed and stuff. So overall, I think the reason behind it was financial, but also the fact that he maybe deep down felt that he wasn't as appreciated as he could have been. I have my personal opinions on the whole deal, and I'll obviously keep those to myself because they are pretty extreme. After that, Barca obviously tried to replace him, find a player that had a similar playing style, and Ousmane Dembele, who left his club in a special way, so to say. And he was deemed the heir to Neymar, and I think Dembele's biggest issue has been his injuries. I mean, that's a pretty obvious statement, but I think a lot of people, I remember at one point, were slandering him, even the media, for his attitude, and I think he's improved that. I still don't think the criticism he got back then was deserved, but I definitely think he's improved. It's been very apparent that he's improved mentally in terms of his desire to succeed at Barca. Barca's faith in him seems to still be there, which is good. His teammates believe in him. His teammates know how hard he's working. And, so with signing a player like Dembele, who's a bit of a showman, but can also bring a lot to a team, you have to try and fit him in a certain way. I don't think Ernesto Valverde was able to do that. I don't think he was able to. I feel like a couple of players were not as good as they could have been under maybe a different manager. And we saw players like Malcolm, who in my eyes was a very talented player, a very hard-working player. We saw him end up in Zenit, when in my eyes, had he been at Barca now, we could have really benefited a lot from him. So I think that whole Valverde era kind of, it really turned things around. And obviously, I mean, when you have a change in the managerial role like that, you're bound to have some consequences, but I think some of them were quite drastic. I mean, you go from a treble in 2015 to then the team kind of, changing a bit. You get some new players in, you get rid of some of the old familiar faces. You change things up a bit, and then after a while, you're like, well, let's get a new manager, and then the manager's style is just completely different to Luis Enrique. I mean, we saw Valverde at Bilbao. I genuinely still believe that Valverde is a good manager. I just don't think he fit the bill that Barca were looking for. I think that's what the main problem was. And when you look at teams, not every manager will fit every team. I mean, Unai Emery, for instance, I think he's a good manager. He didn't fit at Arsenal. He was very good at Sevilla, but he didn't fit at Arsenal. Does that make him a bad manager? I don't think so. I just think that means he doesn't fit what Arsenal are looking for. And that's the same case with someone like Valverde and Barca. That's also why I believe a manager like Setien should be given a proper chance. I mean, a lot of people are coming for his head saying, hey, he's not doing well, he's not risking, he's not being daring, he's kind of just selling us dreams and hopes and stuff. And I think people have to understand that the situation Setien is in is not an easy one to be in, because first off, you come in mid-season to a team that has it's a team that definitely needs changing. I don't think anyone will disagree with that statement, that it is a team that needs quite a few changes. Coming into that mid-season, having everything just thrown at you, not really being able to make a lot of changes. It's mid-season. You have to win. You have these high expectations as a Barca manager, and you have to win La Liga. You have to fight for the Champions League. I think he's done well so far. When I was guesting on FC Barcelona's live match center the other day for the Barca Espanyol game, I said the same thing. I think he's doing a great job. You got to take what you can get, and I think he's done well with what he has. You got to remember, this is a manager who played, so to say, the Barca way at Real Betis with players who objectively would be inferior if you're looking at it on paper. Played the style that Barca were dying to play with, and he did that with those players. So if you give him a preseason and an actual full season to base him off of, to base your perception of him, and kind of look at what he can actually bring to the team, I think Setien is a good fit for Barca. I think so, and I think the whole shift from Enrique to Valverde to Setien, it's been a roller coaster. I mean, Enrique was this direct manager, this manager that dared to take risks. Then you have someone like Valverde, who's a more conservative, more pragmatic, which there isn't anything wrong with. But I think in some cases it doesn't really fit, not at Barca. So when people say, "Hey, why does Setien not play this player or this player? Why is he playing this player who's old and experienced?" It's because he knows he can't take a whole lot of risks. Because if he takes a lot of risks, his job might be at risk, and I don't think he wants that. So
that's a nice bit of a transition summary that you have told us about three different managers at Barcelona. And to be fairly honest, Omar, when I saw Ernesto Valverde in the early days, when it was the early days, by that I mean the Spanish Super Cup, that 5-1 disastrous defeat on aggregate, which was the worst possible beginning to his Barcelona managerial stint. But bit by bit, what I saw bit by bit post that was he moved a few positional pieces here and there. And all of a sudden, what we witnessed in the Bernabeu Clásico after 3 months from that Spanish Super Cup, what we saw was a different Barcelona team. I mean, they were more confident with Messi on the right then. Neymar was, of course, missing from the team, but Valverde had sort of jiggled around with these players, and they presented a good Barcelona team. But of course, then comes the question that this side is one of those teams which won't be judged by the league title or the domestic double. For them, Champions League has to be the assessment point. Tell me how, Omar, how things went from bad to worse for Ernesto Valverde in the Champions League, taking Rome 2018 as bad and Anfield 2019 as worse. How did these two nights summed up Valverde's time at Barcelona?
I think what we saw in Rome was a team that seemed complacent when they stepped onto the pitch. And I think that's a problem that's unfortunately common with many of the bigger sides. They go into the game and they think, oh, well, we've got a big lead, and this team, we're better than this team on paper, so we'll just go in and ace this. That's not how it works. And I think Roma have proven time and time again that they're one of those teams that just have that belief in themselves. And I think part of that reason was, first off, the players' mentality. They just weren't there. I think the way Barca were playing, there were some positive points, of course, but it wasn't that was not what they had to do. They didn't do enough, and I think they started slowly collapsing as Roma kept scoring goals. I think Valverde's substitutions, I don't think they helped. Because, again, that's the thing about him being more of a conservative and less of a daring manager. If you're down, let's say you were up 3-0, you go to the return fixture, it's 3-all, you'd probably go, like, let's say it's the 80th minute, you would probably put in an attacking player or a player that you know can go in and change the game. At the time, Andre Gomes was not that type of player. And the fact that he would make such a substitution, to me, just proved to me, and I think to many people, not to say that was the defining moment where you go, oh, he's not it for Barca. But it was one of those moments where we really saw Valverde in his true colors, in the sense that he is, at his very core, a conservative manager. If he has to hold for the draw, he'll hold for the draw. He won't go for the win. That's just his style. And for some teams, that works. When he was with Bilbao, that worked. He did really well with that. So I think it really comes down to the team's mentality. And I think Valverde, being the conservative manager that he was, caused the Roma disaster, as well as the players' mentality in them being complacent. But as I said back then as well, I think a part of it comes down to, if you have a manager that doesn't mind playing for the draw, and he is like that. That's his style, and that works for him. But it doesn't go for every team. So then when he goes to a team, given that he's the manager, if the players like him, and the players did like Valverde, the board, part of it liked Valverde, right? If not all of it. And so when you have that sort of likability about you, people will listen. And when you have a team where they had a good bond with the manager, if he is the type of manager that will say, yeah, let's go for the draw. Let's have It's 3-3. We were leading 3-0. Now it's 3-3. Let's go for the defensive substitution. They're not going to say no if they agree with him. And I think some of them might have agreed with him at the time. And I think having that mentality as a manager it's kind of contagious. Because then it kind of makes your players have that same mentality too. They're like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess a draw isn't bad. If we're going through, we're going through. That's what ultimately matters. And so if that's what he goes for, and his players kind of take that, have that same mentality, adopt that mentality, if you will, that's going to affect the entire team from top to bottom. And I think we saw in Liverpool, I think it was a different story, because I would like to think that the team knew that they didn't exactly outplay Liverpool at the Camp Nou, because Liverpool got very unlucky in that first leg. I think one thing that Valverde did well in that first leg for me was that he knew that Liverpool are a team that plays on the counters, and that's what they're good at. So he let them have possession instead, because then they knew he would struggle, and then he would have his team play on the counters. And that worked well. They won 3-0. But then in the second game, you can't go in with the same tactic, because they've already read that tactic. Now they know if you're going to do that, they know you're going to do that. And I believe after the first or second goal in the matchday documentary, I think PK, correct me if I'm wrong, I think PK was talking about it, and he said, after the first goal, we started having flashbacks. I think Alba was also, I believe, crying at halftime, or not crying, but he was sad at halftime, where I believe it was only 4-1 on aggregate, or 4-2. So, that being said, I think the mentality of the team was what really hurt them. And I think having a manager with the mentality that Valverde had, which is, hey, if we have to draw, we have to draw. We're not going to go for the win because it's a risk that I'm not willing to take. If you have that mentality and you kind of put that on your players and you have a good relationship with your players, they're going to adopt that. And that's what happened in Roma. And then we saw it again at Anfield. Because at Anfield, I think Liverpool knew that after the first leg, they knew that they had played better than Barca. I think objectively, if you ask people, maybe 9 out of 10 will tell you, yeah, Liverpool played better, but they got unlucky. And there's no shame in winning a game against a team that gets unlucky. That's okay. That's football. That happens. That's not something to be ashamed of. But then after that, you can't go in with the same exact tactic. And I think that's what Valverde did wrong. I mean, it's also on the players, because when you start having flashbacks after one goal, conceding one goal when you were up 4-0 or 3-0, sorry, that's not, that shows a fault in the mentality of the team. And then you have to fix that rather than just look at the manager and go, oh yeah, well he did this. Yeah, but the players, there are 11 players on the pitch. They have a responsibility too. You can't just blame the person that's supposedly leading them, because they also have a mind of their own.
On the other hand, what I also think that didn't work out pretty well for Ernesto Valverde was the fact that Barcelona as a team, they post Neymar's departure, and which was swiftly followed by Iniesta's farewell, all of a sudden this side looked like one which lacked the creative vision, which of course has been central to their success. I mean, look at the current team now. Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba both aged at 31. Gerard Piqué and Luis Suarez aged at 33 alongside Lionel Messi. And even Ivan Rakitic, for that matter, is 32. And these have been tremendously big players for this club. And truth to be told is that they don't have much time left in their careers. So there has to be a major transition that the team needs to go through. I think it didn't work out for Ernesto Valverde as well, but where do you think the club is in that process right now, that process of transition?
I think players like Ansu Fati and Riqui Puig, who I'm personally a big fan of, I think those two can be key to that, to bring in back the creative aspect, to provide that creative dimension to Barcelona. I think those are the kind of players you need. And I think Quique Setién knows that, and that's why he's slowly trying to incorporate them in the team. I would love to see them play as starters just as much as the next guy. But you also have to be realistic about it and say Barca are in that process right now. They are in the process of rebuilding this team with creative players with creative minds who know how to dribble, know how to create space for their teammates, and have good vision to make that final pass or take that shot when it's on. When you look at how these teams, how teams in La Liga play, and you look at a team like Barca, the team that we have right now, the team that Barca have right now, as a squad, I think they have a fairly good balance, at least midfield. I mean, yes, some of them are more defensively oriented. You've got Busquets. Rakitic, I would say, at this point in his career, excels defensively, in a role where he has more space, really, where he has more space to kind of think about it and know which pass to make. You've got Vidal, who's more of a gegenpress and more of a, counter press footballer, but also has a lot of defensive work. You've got Griezmann, who's a striker, but does a lot of defensive work. So you have a team that pretty much has it all. You just need to figure out how to utilize that. And I think it's a lengthy process, because you can't just go, oh, look, you have this striker who could be number 10. Let's just put him there and put Messi up front. Everyone knows Messi isn't just going to be up front, because that's not how he plays. So he's going to drop deep naturally, which is going to push Griezmann a bit out of position. So you have to build that understanding, and I think that's what they're doing right now. I think Messi and Griezmann they're building up a good understanding. You can see it on the pitch. You can hear it on Griezmann's quotes, Suarez's quotes off the pitch, their social media interaction. They are building up this good relationship, and I think Griezmann is here to stay. But when you look at, I think the only thing that they really need to fix up in is the defense. I think that's the most dangerous thing, because Umtiti seems to be on his way out. Longley has been very reliable, in my opinion. PK is very reliable, but he's also aging. So you definitely need replacements there. And then if they're not happy with Firpo, then get another left back in, because Alba is aging. Maybe Juan Miranda could be a choice there. That's pretty much what I have to say on that. But I think they're well in the process, but it takes time. And I think Setien could be the right man for it.
On that matter, let's talk about signings. But I have believed that we did talk about Neymar's departure being the starting point of these events. And post his departure to Paris, has there been more attention given to getting some players in to fill that void, which has resulted in Barcelona not looking forward to other departments for, say, defenders and left back, when we talk about Jordi Alba as well, who's aging. So, I mean, most of the attacking players Barcelona have got pretty recently haven't been quite fruitful deals in the transfer market, be it Ousmane Dembele in the entirety, because the amount that was paid for him now doesn't look like one which has been repaid to Barca in the previous seasons. It's a sort of a long-term investment for them. Philippe Coutinho didn't quite work out for them. Antoine Griezmann also needs some time, particularly because he hasn't been allowed to play in his natural role where he learned to become a superstar at the Atletico Madrid club. So do you think Barcelona's prolonged importance on filling the void post Neymar's departure has costed them dear when it comes to other departments on the pitch?
I think it's definitely affected them. I don't think it's too late in that sense. I don't think they've reached the point where it's like, oh, we can't buy more defenders because all the good ones are off the market. But I think it has affected it. And on one hand, I'm thinking, well, you maybe shouldn't have been looking for that long. You could have looked for one player, said, okay, that's it, move on. But you can also kind of understand it, because if a third of your attack is not what you want it to be, your attack isn't really going to succeed much. So it makes sense. But on the other hand, I don't feel that neglecting the other departments of the team, especially the defense. Because now Barca have a lot of midfielders right now. They've got, I'd say off the top of my head, maybe 6 to 7 midfielders in the first team, which is a lot. Now we've got Pjanic coming in, Artur going the other way, so it's a 1-for-1 basically in terms of personnel. You've got Mateus Fernandes, who's with Real Valladolid on loan. He was signed for Barca B. You have some players in Barca B that could be interesting. Alex Collado, for instance, could be interesting to have in. I expect that we'll see him in preseason. So you've got a lot of midfielders and attacking players. So now, in my opinion, as I said, they need to focus on the defense. And I don't think it's too late, but I think they have to shift their focus. Now that they really seem to be, coming in all guns blazing on the Lautaro Martinez deal, that they've pretty much agreed with him on personal terms, from what I've heard. But then after that, you have to agree with Inter, and fair enough, that takes time. But then at the same time, shift your attention to the defense. That definitely needs an overhaul. You definitely need a keeper that is happy playing a backup role and is also reliable. Because Ter Stegen, as great a footballer, a keeper as he is, and he hasn't been plagued by injuries. But if he does get injured, and all we have is a Neto who wants to leave, understandably so. I think Neto is he's a good keeper. But as we saw this season, he's barely gotten any chances. So if he would want to leave, it would make sense. So you need a keeper who has a solid level, but would be acceptable of a backup role. I think Iñaki Peña from Barca B could be the man for that job. So if they push him up, that's sorted. Then they only have to focus on the defense and the Lautaro deal or Neymar if they think Neymar could be feasible for them financially as well. I think it's doable, but they really need to just shift their focus to the defense. If they shift their attention to the defense, they will find someone for sure.
And now let's come on to a new Barcelona manager, Quique Setien. Well, talking about him, Omar, tell me, why was he appointed at the first place? What was the thought behind him being selected as the Barcelona coach? Was it only to do with the fact that his playing style focuses on the beautiful game that has been an important ingredient of the Barcelona football recipe? Do you think it was a decision that was taken too quickly, or was it given a good amount of thought?
I think the whole process seemed to be one that just happened, If you look at it from the outside, it seems like, oh, wow, already? I don't think that they appointed him in a rush. I don't think I don't think it happened too fast, like realistically. Because for me, Setien is a very likable guy. He's said multiple times before he was appointed, if he would coach Barca, for sure, no doubt at all. He showed that he could beat Barca playing the style of football that they wanted to play. And he is a guy that knows how to communicate. He's well-spoken. He's a calm person. Doesn't get too heated. I think he's a humble guy as well. I think Barca made the right choice. And I know people will say, oh, well, again, he's not playing the right players. He's not playing the players we think are good. Why does he keep playing X player or Y player? He can't take the risks that he wants to take right now because Barca are in a very delicate position.
Yeah.
And that's just a matter of the fact. He can't do exactly what he wants to do, like many other managers in the league, because they're in a position where right now, especially post-pandemic football, you don't really have much choice. Yeah, you have 5 substitutions, but if you mess up one of them, that could cost you the game. And in this late stage of the season, you can't risk that. So I think overall, I think they made the right choice. I know people will be calling for Xavi, and I think Xavi has done well with El Sadd, but you have to remember, if people were coming for Setien because he's an inexperienced manager, Xavi hasn't exactly won major trophies yet either. And that's not me taking a dig at Xavi. That's just me saying, be realistic with what you're asking for. Because I think Xavi could be a great manager for Barca. I don't doubt that. But I also think Setien could be. And I think Setien at least deserves the chance to at least fulfill his contract, which Bartomeu said, Barca's president, Jose Bartomeu, recently said that he expected Setien to do. So I think the reason a lot of people are not happy with Setien is because they knew that the option to get Xavi was there, and they feel like Barca didn't just hold on to that. I think it makes sense for Xavi to not have joined, especially given that he's friends with Victor Font, who's a presidential candidate. So I think for him, the ideal point would be join when Font joins, if Font joins, and then just start off fresh. Clean slate, new president, new rule, new philosophy, stuff like that. So I think Barca made the right choice of the people that were out there, the manager that were available. I think they made the right choice. I mean, people could argue Pochettino could have been interesting. I think so too. But then again, given his association with Espanyol, I don't think he would have liked that too much. I don't think Barca would have liked that too much. I think they also cared about their image. And if they actually appointed Pochettino, I think a lot of people would have gone, oh, well, look at you sellouts. You're appointing a guy that literally trashed our club years ago. So I think overall, taking everything into account, I think they made the right choice. I think from a playing style perspective, he's the right man. Personal perspective, he's the right man. He's a professional, especially when the episode with Sarabia happened at the Clásico, where he went on and said, "Well, yeah, but you got to keep a cool head. He's a professional. He knows what to do." And for me, that matters a lot. In a manager, I think they made the right choice.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting take on the fact that he has been a bit conservative. Because if you look at possibly the biggest game that Barcelona have played under Quique Setien till now, which has to be the Bernabeu Clásico. The first one, of course, was a barren game at the Camp Nou. But there wasn't too much to separate the two sides at the Bernabeu as well. The only difference which I saw on the pitch was the fact that Barcelona played in that game with a formation between 4-4-2 and 4-3-3. And it wasn't until Braithwaite came onto the pitch that we saw the Catalans use some width. Whereas on the other hand, if you saw Real Madrid, it was their width on the pitch and a much more eager approach to attack that gave them the 2 goals.
Yeah.
So I think it would be fair to say that Quique Setien should get some more time. However, we need to talk about another interesting aspect when it comes to Barcelona, which is politics. Well, Barcelona, of course, have been one of those clubs that haven't shied away from politics surrounding the city and the club, which makes its organization, its management, much more a socio-political thing rather than a corporate one. So tell us about the scenario that has been building on over the years since Neymar left, the recent tussle between high-profile players led by their captain, Lionel Messi, which in its entirety is inarguably the most high-profile player in Spain. So tell us about this kind of a brawl that has taken place. It's a silent coup that has taken place at the Camp Nou between the players and the management. Does it look good right now? And that takes us to the million-dollar question. Does that mean that Lionel Messi will be leaving the club?
I personally believe that the situation between the board and the players was... I think it was sort of a misunderstanding, because when you look at it, the players were not happy and felt that the people inside the club were kind of leaking stuff and saying bad things about them. I think there has been disagreements between the players and the board, and we saw that. And the players themselves went out and said, "Hey, this is not okay." So no one is really denying that. That's just that's factual. But I think Messi is staying. I don't think he's leaving. I think it's paper talk, if you ask me. I think it's rumors. Because the thing is, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, Manchester City could afford him," for instance. Or let's say Paris could afford him. Through sponsorships, other clubs could maybe afford him. But other than having him leave, what that would mean for Barca, that's one part of it, is what it would mean for Barca, which obviously would be disastrous if he continues at the level he's at a different club. That's disastrous for Barca if he leaves. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that he and his family have been settled and happy in Barcelona for years. And he's even talked about, you surely remember this, when a lot of people were saying, "Oh, he could return to his native Argentina, could play for renewals." That's like his end goal. Like when he's done with Barca and feels like he can compete at a high level, he'll go there, right? I don't remember exactly when. I think maybe it was a year ago. One of his relatives was talking about how Messi was not going to come back to Argentina as a footballer because it would be too dangerous because of how heated the local derbies get, because of the situation of the country. That he would not return as a footballer. So if he doesn't return as a footballer, where would he go? I don't see Messi as the type of person who would leave Barca for another European club. You know, the loyalty that he's had to this club has been immense. Even years back when people were talking about, he has feud with the manager, he wants to leave the club. Even then he didn't leave. He could have left to Guardiola's City, theoretically speaking. He could have rejoined Guardiola at a new club, been the main man to build the entire team around. And he, in some aspects, people could say, well, maybe he would have had more success then, given what Barca went through in the years that followed. But even then, he still stayed with Barca. So after the whole debacle, the whole spiel that happened now about the board, I feel like they've come to an agreement. Because back when the whole thing was happening, you would feel some of the players taking slight digs, maybe. or they wouldn't post on social media. Not necessarily this time around, but I remember there was a time where some of the players would take some digs at the management, like, oh, they should have done more. I feel like we could have done this differently. They would sort of hint at it. But this time, there really wasn't much other than those statements that was echoed by the team, by some of the players, and then the board coming out and saying, "Hey, we'll hopefully we'll fix this." And I think they have fixed it. I don't think there are internal feuds in Barca anymore. I think there was, and we saw that, and the players admitted to that. But I don't think there is that anymore. I think things have cooled down in Barcelona internally. And I think there is a better understanding now, especially because the team isn't as frustrated mentally, like in terms of the games they're playing and so on and so forth. There isn't the same frustration. There doesn't seem to be any feud. I don't think there is any. I think there was, and we saw that, and it's pretty much blown over.
Yeah, and pretty much it will be a huge disaster for Barcelona, because if you look at Lionel Messi's numbers over the last 2 seasons, he has in many games even taken 70 to 80% of Barcelona's shots on target. Off the field, of course, the transfer window decisions haven't really seemed to please him in particular. But I think overall, when you talk about the loyalty factor and you talk about the emotional attachment that Lionel Messi and his family has to this city, it does seem like there is going to be a contract extension pretty soon. Now, let's talk about another player here, Omar, whom you mentioned early on in this episode, a player whom many people tend to forget about when it comes to talking of Barcelona. Their number one, Marc-Andre ter Stegen, was, of course, counted as the best goalkeeper in the world only 1 or 2 seasons back. And to be fair, if Messi has been the goal provider for Barcelona, ter Stegen has been the defensive wall. But we haven't really seen him at his usual best. Omar, is it that Barcelona's defenders not being exactly the most solid ones right now? Is it that which makes ter Stegen look not so good on the pitch? Because he has had only 40% of clean sheets this season, which, considering his standards, is pretty less.
A part of it is, of course, the defense, that there have been changes in terms of who's playing center back, the pairing. The left back and right back have pretty much been consistently Alba and Semedo. But then when you've made changes, that does change the dynamic a bit. The midfield changes also play a role, because then if you have a late runner from midfield from the opposition and he's not being tracked by the midfielder that should be tracking him, that could cost a goal. So I think overall it's pretty much to do with the rebuild that Setien is slowly doing. I think that's what it comes down to. The fact that you're trying to change the midfield while also changing the attack and the defense. You're pretty much changing every single part of the team. Yeah. So it goes with the vision that you have for the team, which I think is the right vision that he seems to be having. Once you're doing that, you're bound to have some defensive slip-ups, just like we're having some attacking slip-ups. I mean, when Suarez was injured, you saw Barca struggle a lot in the runs off the ball. Griezmann was making some runs, not really getting the ball. Other players were making runs, not really getting the ball. It happens. But when Suarez returned, we saw how important Suarez was to that attack. And that's only losing one player. I mean, you could argue in some games maybe the objective, I would say, he could have done more. Sure. He's an aging player. His playing time needs to be distributed properly. But having lost just that one player, Barca struggled in attack for a while. Now, that's only one attacker. When you lose a player like De Jong, or when you don't play a player like Artur, who helps bring control and balance, or when you play a Rakitic who's tired, or a Busquets who's aging and has played pretty much every game all season, you're bound to have these slip-ups. Combine that with maybe not playing a consistent center-back pairing because one of your players gets injured or suspended. You have to play another one who's pretty much out of form, as well as maybe trying a new defender in there. That can cost you. And it's not necessarily a bad risk to take because you need to help these players improve. But you also have to be aware that that may cost you a few goals and maybe a few clean sheets. And I think that's just part of it. I think it's part of the rebuild. Because he's not just focusing on the defense. He's focusing on improving certain areas, improving, certain things in how Barca play. Do they play out wide? Do they go more central? what do the midfielders do? What roles do they have? Because they don't have the same roles as they maybe had under Valverde. So it's that whole rebuild, that whole dynamic that's changing in the team. And I think that's ultimately what's making Ter Stegen not have as many clean sheets. I don't think that takes away from his performances, which I think has been brilliant. And I think keepers are unsung heroes in general. I mean, Jan Oblak was having a monster an amazing season recently, and no one really talked about it. I think that comes with being a keeper, but I also think that when you're changing a whole team, you're bound to have some slip-ups in goal as well. And I think it's natural. I don't think people should put too much into that personally, but I understand why some people would be concerned by it. But I don't think it's a cause for concern.
Before we let you go, Omar, final question. We can agree on one fact that Barcelona, as of now, may have, and in all possibilities, may have given the La Liga title to Real Madrid. They're just 2 points away from snatching the title from the defending champions. But how good a team is Barcelona for Champions League, which will begin in August?
I think the mentality that Barca seem to have, and the as far as they are into this process of rebuilding, some players that are gaining confidence, getting playing time. I think Barca at least will be able to advance to the quarterfinals. At least I think they can beat Napoli, because Barca seems to be a team that's getting slowly more and more confident. Things are clicking more and more, which obviously is very, very important. But obviously they will face tough opponents, that's for sure. I think Atletico have been a good side. Just to mention some of the Liga sides, Real Madrid have been strong. They've been a strong team. They've shown that they know how to win games, even if it's in a style that everyone may not like. But they know how to win those games. City lost the Premier League title. They missed out on that. But then they turned their season around a bit, started getting some convincing wins. I think overall the Champions League will be very unpredictable because you'll see the big teams. Some of them should be struggling, but they're not. Some of them should be doing really well, but they're not. I could see Barca getting far, but I wouldn't be surprised if Napoli made it to the semis at the same time. So it's very hard to say. I think the Champions League will be very, very unpredictable.
And we would want it to be unpredictable because that is why we love the game. Thank you so much, Omar, for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to have had this conversation with you.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I think this was great, and I'm very happy I could join, and hopefully we can do this some other time as well.
For sure. And for our listeners, if you want to follow all the exciting coverage at offer from Omar and his team of wonderful storytellers, do follow the Blaugranagram.com. It is the most authentic place to visit for everything Barcelona. And that is it in today's episode. We'll be back next week. Stay safe, stay sane, and for everything about sports, stay tuned to Sports Flashes.
ये हैं बॉन्ड 007 वाले, उनके खास चेले
बॉन्ड, जेम्स बॉन्ड,
शर्लक होम, जानते हो उनको मानते हैं ये अपना आइडियल, मतलब के आदर्श। बचपन में जो बच्चों को बीमारियों से बचने के इंजेक्शन और टीके